Okay, welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. It is January 3rd, 2023, the first trading day of the year of 2023. We're going to review crude oil today. Things are not looking good. We talked about in our last video, we may have an ICL, an intermediate cycle low here. However, the broader market is in a downtrend. Like the S&P 500 is in weekly cycle decline, and so that may get dragged down by that. It's starting to look like that is what's happening. Let's look at the daily chart first. So we talked about the fact that, okay, maybe this was actually our daily cycle low versus this. So that would be a daily cycle low on day 54. At the time, we had a high on day 11, which is right here. That high is at 81.14. I talked about in that previous video, which take a look at for pinned comment in the comment section. You'll have all the previous crude oil videos. Overview of cycles analysis, overview of swing highs and swing lows. So this was a swing high, and that 81 to 83 zone was probably, like you see these wicks, right? Was probably going to prove difficult in terms of supply. And so look what we did today. So this is today's candle. So to be clear, this is a bearish outside candle. So important that you understand that concept. Meaning it made a new high and made a new low and closed red. Now we haven't closed yet, to be fair, but so far we are red. And so assuming we don't reverse back up and go green for the day, this will close as a bearish outside candle. That is very bearish, as the name suggests, because what it is essentially a false breakdown, a false breakout on a lower time frame. And in this case, let's look at the hourly chart as a for instance, right? Like look, there it is. You see it? Like you can see that's your false breakout, right? Like price poked its head above that and then got rejected. And that's what creates your daily outside bearish your bearish outside candle. That happened at 3 a.m. overnight. We had this big swing high. And then look at that clean downtrend. My God, you look in the textbook, you'll see an image of this as your downtrend. So you make a low, make a high. What kind of high is this? It's a lower high. Then you make a low. You expect that you're going to make another lower high. This would be your ceiling, that you're not going to be able to get back to 79.60. If we can, then it means we're reversing. We're reversing the downtrend. So let's look at what that means for the daily chart. Let's go back to the daily time frame. So today we made that new high and then pulled back. Today is day 15. So it is very possible that today is the high for our daily cycle, that from here, we're going to begin our daily cycle decline, making a pattern of lower lows and lower highs. That said, because of the different cross currents, we may not get a cascade lower and instead just a kind of a grind lower. Because we know that the U.S. is buying for the strategic petroleum, the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and then we know they're doing that around $70. Not a coincidence. We literally bottomed at $70.10. So you could see a world where this thing just trades in like a big sloppy range. So not huge downside, but also not great upside, right? And if we look at the weekly chart, this is where things get really interesting. We talked about the fact that this looked like a weekly cycle low on week 24, and then we started a new weekly cycle and we made a high on week 6, and then we were starting to decline. But then we started to see signs that we may have a new weekly cycle in play. Again, that's why cycles analysis change. That's why you don't want to focus so much on the cycles analysis and you want to focus more on the price action, which is to say, are we in an uptrend or are we in a downtrend? We're threatening to turn this high into a lower high. Actually, I think we actually made a higher high today for the weekly candle. So this is super important. We just talked about what a bearish outside candle is on a daily chart. The bearish outside candle exists on every time frame. It can happen on every time frame, happens on every time frame. What does this candle look like it's about to do, folks? That's right. This candle here, this current weekly candle, we only have 1 day of price action, obviously, so far, is trying to turn into a bearish outside candle the same way the daily did. So the daily candle already turned into a bearish outside candle. Now we have 3 days left to trade in this week after today. And so you imagine we do that by getting below this low here, which is $76.83. So that's about $1 lower from here. Very high probability pattern. Very likely that we do hit that. And if we think about what that means for the weekly cycle, notice, and I talked about this in the last video, you generally want to see a close above the 10-period moving average, which is this blue, sort of light blue line here. We didn't get there last week, and we talked about so it's interesting. We failed right below it. And so this is suggesting a move back down to 70. Again, wouldn't be surprised to see a ton of support there because we know there is literally a huge buyer that's looking to buy at around that $70 level. Now, if we go back to the old scenario where this is just still a week, its own weekly cycle. This is week 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That would put us at week 14. So let's monitor this. Now the odds have shifted to this being, like, basically meaning we're in weekly cycle decline since here. So we started our decline in week 6. It's now week 14. So you can do, that's easy math. We've been declining for 8 weeks. These cycles can be pretty erratic in terms of their length. Like this one was 19. This was 15. This was 24. So it wouldn't be like, it's unclear when we're going to get the bottom, right? Like, is it going to be closer to like 19 weeks or is it going to be like more like 24 or is it going to be more like 15? We're going to have to watch for it. But obviously not, there's no reason to rush to get long here. And what does the monthly chart look like? We obviously have only 1 day of trading so far in the monthly chart. And we talked about this in the last video, how we were going to open as an inside month, given how this candle looks. And so that's exactly what happened. And the range on this candle is that low at $70.10 and the high at 83. And so we're just now inside that range still. And so again, it looks like we're going to go and test that $70 area. And it's going to be a question of, does that hold? And like just bigger picture, this is our high so far for this long-term cycle, March 2022, right? That was month 23 from this rally here off of the COVID low. And so it appears that we're continuing the long-term cycle decline. Again, it's all only really just a question of, do we undercut this $70 level and get into the 60s? That would put us, like, if we break down below 70, high probability we get down to the mid 60s, maybe even like 63. And so that would be a nice trade, another $7 of downside if we break the $70 trigger. So buy stop, or sell stop, I should say, would be in order, something like that. So that's oil itself. It's WTI. And again, as I mentioned in previous videos, Brent follows really the same exact trend. Just, the actual numbers are different. So for Brent, that monthly range that you want to be aware of is a high of 89.33 and a low of 75.16. So 75 is the lower end of the range for Brent that we're likely going to, that we may test. Now at the same time, and again, this is the same chart as oil. You can see this looked kind of scary in real time. We pulled back and then we made a higher high, pulled back and made a higher high. Again, this bearish outside candle, not super inspiring, and more importantly, knowing the broader trend of the market, there's caution to be warranted. Let's run through some of these other names. What are they doing? Let's look at XLE first. And we talked about the fact that XLE's ICL looked like that. XLE may have made an ICL that same week 21. That now appears to be not the case. So we had a high on week 18, and we are still declining in the weekly cycle, it appears. So this big red weekly candle is week 21. So this is week 22, 23, 24, 25. That would be the expectation now. That said, that's pretty late in the weekly cycle. So, we may not get, a ton more weeks of downside for XLE. But you would at least think we're going to test this lower end of the range. And so that's going to be the case for all of these other names. You can really easily pull up a chart and see those levels for whatever name. So VLO, for instance, that's a test of the 115 area, basically. XOP, that would be a test of the, oh gosh. You see, this is a perfect example. One of these is not like the other. XOP is already broken down below that pivot. So this is leading to the downside. If one were to be short the oil complex, XOP would be the place to do it. That is actually really big tell. And let's see, is it making new lows on the monthly? Yeah, yep, it's a new low on the monthly as well. Yikes. What about Exxon? Wow, Exxon, that pivot level is around the 102 area. Phillips 66, what are we looking like? That low is at 98. OIH, one of the stronger of these guys, is that low is at 271, more or less. ConocoPhillips, that low is at 109.73. So again, it's the same pattern for all of these. The levels are just different. Oh, here we go. We've been talking about how Devon Energy is an underperformer, and it's doing the same thing as XOP, right? It's already breaking below that pivot, this clear pivot. And as we talked about, really the 55 area becomes a magnet for this one. It still hasn't made it there, and we're probably headed there now, and it'll be interesting to see how we react once we get down there. Marathon Oil also breaking down below that pivot. So it's pretty, you can clearly see the ones that are weaker, right? Like your Exxons, your ConocoPhillips, your XLE itself, and that's obviously very heavily weighted Exxon, have not broken down, but some of these other names have. Specifically Marathon Oil, Devon, and XOP. Those are the dogs in the energy sector, friends. And how is Chevron looking? That's a huge weight in the XLE. Still looking relatively strong. For Exxon, that pivot is 167. So I'm not gonna make this video too long here. We're headed to new lows. It's really gonna be a question of, does that cause a cascade of selling lower? Again, knowing that oil may be range bound because of the macro conditions. And also note that for these stocks, they've also made a daily cycle high as well, right? All right, so they're declining into a new daily cycle. So let's look at XLE as an example. That actually could help us to triangulate the timing for this, right? So we have our high on day 11. So then day 12, 13, 14. This is day 15, big swing high. And so if we imagine that we're going to get like a 25-day cycle, let's just, ballpark it, right? Very broad scenario here. Because, it'd be odd to get a cycle that was much shorter than that. I mean, because you can see this one was really long. So it's also possible that we're going to get a shorter one as a balance. That was really long. So this thing has like really long cycles. This is XLE. And so again, let's just say 25, just throw that out there. That would give us a low around January 18th, right? If this is longer in like the 40, 50-day range, we see a low closer to like the middle of February. So we're going to be watching for that. But this gives you a good clue. The end of this daily cycle is probably also the end of the weekly cycle as well, which is to say your next daily cycle low is likely the next weekly cycle low as well. So that is really good to know, and something that we'll be watching closely to monitor the character of that bounce. Because very important to understand, just because we get a weekly cycle low doesn't mean that the next weekly cycle is going to be bullish. We could get a weekly cycle that, has a really short rally, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then just collapses, or even shorter. So we want to be vigilant of that. But we'll continue to provide updates. We'll also update on Twitter. So if you're not following there, definitely take a look for a link in the description. And as I said, take a look at that pinned tweet. Ton of important information in there. But we will leave this update at that. Oil is moving lower, back into that $70 range zone, most likely. Obviously, we could see a massive reversal tomorrow. We can't predict the future. We can only analyze the trend. So we'll leave it at that. Thank you for watching this video.